It says that she is a gaunt, black-haired glamour ghoul who comes out through ominous drifting mists. Well, now, this is obviously not true because I don't believe in that sort of stuff, you know. And it says that she has a pet spider named Rollo, and that can't be. And she hates, you know how people exaggerate. She hates the sunlight, and she's the ghostess with Vampira!
This is the story of one of those girls. Like almost everyone else that comes to Hollywood, she stayed.
Think of her as a long shadow cast by the first cathode blast of the television tube. A nightmare creature out of erotic fantasy. Monster, comedienne, vision in the mist, the original riot girl, and a birth mother to hipster irony.
She just came roaring, roaring at you. She was a real firebrand.
Comedian and writer Dana Gould.
People think of, like, because of the image of Vampira, that she was this sort of goth, mordant. It couldn't have been further from the truth. She was this sort of bubblegum popping beatnik hipster chick.
Above all, think of Maila Nurmi as Vampira, because she'd want you to do that. She was always very proud of the iconic status she managed to achieve. I'm just a bit player in her story. But she'll always be Maila to me.
My mother was one of those people who could see an airplane already gracefully in flight and still insist that it was too heavy to fly, and still believe that it was too heavy to fly. Forever planning for a rainy day and warning you to wear clean underwear in case you're hit by a streetcar. One day I was in the tub, still at home, 17 years old, and Mother had the radio on in the other room. I heard a voice on the radio, jumped out of the tub, shrieking, forgetting my modesty, rushed into the bedroom, ran to the radio, threw my arms around and shrieked, "Mama, Mama!" That radio announcer, that ordinary radio announcer, is no ordinary radio announcer. He was talking about airplane wings or something. He's a genius. That man is a genius. And he's my friend. Oh, Mother was shocked. Psst, of course he's a genius. That's Orson Welles. He's a famous genius. Everybody knows that. And don't you ever talk like that. He's not your friend. You're Maila Elizabeth Suriname, and you work in the fish cannery in Astoria, Oregon. And don't you forget it. And don't you talk like that. People are going to say you're crazy. Some months later in New York City, perhaps 8 months later, when I met Orson Welles, I told him that story, and he asked me to give my mother a message. Tell her, you are right. Yeah, you are I am your friend. And tell your mother to have more faith in people. I went through life trying to prove, until Mother's death, trying to win her approval. Not knowing that it was an impossible thing to do.
I've never met a more alert, vibrant, or vivacious person than Maila Nurmi, and we only got to know each other during her 70s and the late-breaking Indian summer of her tempestuous life. She was a regal beauty then, lined, gray-haired, and impoverished, but royalty in exile all the same. I can just imagine her during her heyday, A spirited and unearthly beauty with her arched eyebrows, impossibly slim waist, mesmeric eyes, and high Scandinavian cheeks. It's ironic, but Maila is best known for a smallish role in a movie she never took seriously, where she doesn't even speak. That silent performance came in the infamous cult film Plan 9 from Outer Space, often called the worst movie ever made. Maila claimed to have thrown her Plan 9 dialogue away because she recognized how bad director Ed Wood's script was.
You see? You're stupid minds. Stupid! That's all I'm taking from you. Get back here, you jerk!
But Wood billed Maila as Vampira in Plan 9's credits.
Turn off the electrodes quickly. They can't tell us from anyone else.
The entranced, robotic Vampira of Plan 9 is the image most people have of her in their heads today. The television Vampira was a gothic wiseacre, the first TV horror host in a camp style later embraced by Maila's reluctant nemesis, Elvira, and actor Ernie Anderson, a.k.a. Ghoulardi.
Tonight's movie group has holes in it only the Swiss could love.
I interviewed Maila on camera in 1997 for Schlock, The Secret History of American Movies, my documentary about exploitation films. At the time, we'd been friends for 3 years. I'd written about her in 1994, an article that currently stands as the biography on the official Vampira website. I used only a few minutes of Maila in Schlock, but Maila and I agreed that someday I'd use the 70 or so minutes of video we collaborated on to find a way to let her speak.
It'll be sort of chronological in flow.
Yes, okay.
Betrayal is a motif in her story, so she had lost some of her trust in people. But for some reason we never discussed, she decided to trust me.
What'd you kiss me for?
I've been wondering whether I'd like it.
What's the decision?
I don't know yet.
We began our conversation by talking about Maila's early and rather frustrating tenure in Hollywood, where she was briefly under personal contract to Howard Hawks, the director who paired Bogart and Bacall into Have and Have Not and The Big Sleep.
You know how to whistle, don't you, Steve? You just put your lips together and blow.
I wonder if you could start by telling me about Howard Hawks and your original arrival in Hollywood.
Well, let's see. When I was a young actress of 17, a young lady of 17, I tried first to crack Los Angeles, but nothing happened here, so I joined a magazine crew and crossed the country to get to Broadway, and somehow wormed my way into a Mae West show. Catherine was great. And from that, I got a glorious review in the Hollywood Reporter, and Howard Hawks saw it and sent for me. He said, come to Hollywood. I think that was 1945, and he had just brought Lauren Bacall in, and maybe 6 months before, so I was to be the new Lauren Bacall.
And what happened to you under Howard Hawks' tutelage?
Well, they brought me here saying I was $1 million property, and we don't traffic with anything but, and when I came here, they didn't even know I was here, They ignored me. They gave me $75 a week, and I sat in my rooming house waiting for them to call. I didn't like Howard Hawks. I thought he was stupid. So I tore my contract up in two, said, kindly find a place for this in one of your numerous wastebaskets. And they did.
Hawks allegedly fell in love with Bacall, and Maila resembled her a bit physically. It's a backdrop to her first Hollywood experience that seems pertinent to me.
Decades later, Hawks was speaking to the film school at USC, and somebody asked him, he was talking about the ladies he had discovered, the actresses. And somebody brought up my name, and he said, that's the one that got away.
You were a model for a while, a sometime cheesecake model.
Oh,
which
yes.
is a term that for us is kind of, we don't know what that means exactly. What is a cheesecake model, and what was it for you?
What is a cheesecake model? It's a young bunny in a bikini. I was trying to be cute. No, we had two kinds of cheesecake models in America at that time. On the East Coast, they were doing what Betty Page did. You know, they were being lurid, you know, in in black underwear. But on this coast, there was very little of it. But what there was we were surfer girls, you know, little sunbathing girl next doors. And it was very hard for me to look like a girl next door, but I strived to, and I became one of the 10 top pinup models in America. But that didn't pay anything.
And around what time would this have been?
1948 through 51. But what we did was we worked for tear sheets and hoped that Howard Hughes would see our picture in a magazine and give us a movie contract. That's what it was all about.
By later standards, things like cheesecake modeling or exotic dancing in the 40s, how would it compare to the kind of erotic stuff that came on down the pike later?
Oh, no, it's not the same thing at all. We were just sunny little personalities, lightly clad, you know, happily enjoying the sunshine and the surf. We weren't coming on to anyone, you know. So we weren't sordid. No, we weren't sordid. It was wholesome cheesecake.
If Maila didn't find success in Hollywood, at least she found romance. Dean Reisner was a former child star and aspiring screenwriter who would later help launch Clint Eastwood's directing career. She called him my cuddly, confused, and rumpled dink, my own private teddy bear. She called him husband, too, a status not formalized but achieved both by common law and emotionally. For a time, Mrs. Reisner was all she cared to be. By 1951, Maila Nurmi was a failed Hollywood starlet, about to turn 30. She'd had some success as a model in the relatively chaste erotica that was socially acceptable in her time, but she hadn't parlayed it into anything more substantive. But all that was about to change, thanks to luck, opportunism, and a new and transformational technology.
Giants, Dodgers, tonight at 7 Eastern on Fox. You're gonna reconsider this whole morning thing with Taco Bell's warm breakfast quesadilla, crisp hash brown, Cinnabon delights, and a coffee. Wake up to the new $5 Bell breakfast box, only at Taco Bell.
Oh yeah, y'all really outdid yourselves this time.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We should have rescheduled.
They barely noticed.
Hon, they've noticed.
Baby, it's fine. I've already found a personal loan on Credit Karma, and I saw my rates and approval odds before I applied.
Oh.
Till the roofer's coming tomorrow.
Okay.
Couldn't get those roofers to come today, huh?
Find a loan up to $50,000 on Credit Karma.
The pre-Elvis post-war era is thought of as a sleepy time of conservatism and political reaction, but currents of rebellion were underway. One of the earliest came in the form of ghoulish New Yorker cartoons by the great Charles Addams, who set a family of grinning monsters loose against the reigning tyranny of normalcy. Addams' creations might be found in a movie house, laughing their way through a scene that reduced every other patron to tears. And he seemed to have a real chip on his shoulder toward America's most sacrosanct holiday. Perhaps his most famous panel showed his cheerful monsters poised on a rooftop, about to empty a cauldron of boiling oil onto a semicircle of Christmas carolers. Shocking stuff in those days. Maila Nurmi was an instinctive rebel herself, so it was inevitable she'd be influenced by Addams' anarchism and black comedy. But first, she had to find her medium. It turned out it wasn't movies after all, but a brand new domestic appliance, the broadcast TV.
Do you remember the first time you saw a television program, and if so, what that experience was like?
That's an interesting question. I do. It was a Imogene Coca and Sid Caesar? The Sid Caesar Show, I guess it was called. I was just mesmerized and a little frightened because it was, you know, something new. We always fear what we don't understand.
Al, I wonder if you tell our audience exactly who this lady is. I don't know who she is, but it's all right with me.
I was a little frightened by it, even though it was comedy. Just thought, gee, strange, wonderful, strange.
What was the general reaction? What was your sense of the way people reacted when suddenly this new thing appeared in the country?
I don't know that I was busy evaluating the world at large in those days, but I saw an opportunity for myself. I said, everybody's jumping onto this new bandwagon, and they're looking for talent, and God knows I've been a monologist since I was born. The thing that was most popular at that time, locally here anyway, was a show called The Websters, and it was a daytime soap.
A creature of habit.
Well, there's one habit I never want to lose, darling.
And I thought, that's what they want, and so that's what I'm going to do. But then I thought, but that's too, I can't do it exactly that way. It's too wholesome. I don't like to do wholesome people. I don't like to dwell on their very existence, you know, let alone pretend to be one. So I thought, well, let's satirize them. Let's take some very unwholesome people and have them behave as though they think they are wholesome, you know. And then, oh, no, Charles Addams already did that.
Maila kicked the idea of an Addams Family TV series around where she could, but she wasn't really moving in the circles where production decisions get made. What happened next is a real-life Cinderella story, with more claim on the cliché than most. Because like Cinderella, the turning point for Maila came at a fancy dress ball, choreographer Lester Horton's annual Hollywood masquerade, the Bal Carib.
I went as the then unnamed Morticia Addams. I bound my bosoms and I wore a little bit of pale mauve, white makeup and a little bit of pale mauve powder so that it looked as though I'd been entombed, you know. And I wore sheer lavender nylon gloves, and everything was vaguely deathly in tone. And I went to the Bal Carib, looking to be discovered for television, actually, hoping that somebody would get on the ball and supply the rest of the family for me in a vehicle. But instead I got discovered just for myself alone. A local station, KBC TV Channel 7, approached me. The producer was named Hans Stromberg Jr. He wanted me to work alone without the entire family, you know, without Charles Addams or the family, but just to do the Charles Addams character. We can't do that. I said, it belongs to Charles Addams. It's not my character. So I said, well, give me a few days. I didn't want to say a flat no. They were like offering money. So, and some help of some kind. So I said, give me a few days, and I came back with a vampire. I still kept the dress. I knew they liked the dress. I kept the dress and the black hair. But I turned her into a vamp. I gave her platform shoes and fishnet stockings, and I slit the dress up. And I took a lot of things from a magazine called Bizarre. And, you know, I didn't know what a dominatrix was, but that's obviously what I was emulating. I cinched the waist, and I wore a long phallic cigarette holder and long phallic fingernails, and, you know. And then I made the mouth very wet with lip gloss, very bloody red, and then, and so that it almost appeared to be dripping as though I just finished with a victim. I didn't actually have fangs, but I tried to imply that I had them. And, okay, they went with it. I said, fine. Then they wanted a name for it, and my husband supplied the name Vampira, and they said, great, and we went off with it.
A vampire cocktail. You like it? It hates you.
Only 2 minutes of footage from the Vampira show exists, and it's of extremely poor quality. It was shot on film off a television monitor in 1954 as a KABC promotion for advertisers. Otherwise, the Vampira show went out live in an era before videotape, and nothing of it is known to survive. Maila first viewed these images in the late 1990s. She was blasé about it. It was the only time she ever saw herself in the part.
Screaming really nasty, so.
According to Maila, her Vampira scream was secretly autoerotic.
To the camera. And when she almost reaches the viewer, she suddenly screams a blood-curdling scream. And then says, "Screaming relaxes me so." As if she's having just had an orgasm. I mean, that was my thought. And that was what I was trying to imply in a ladylike manner.
What I need is a Vampira cocktail to settle my nerves. It'll not only settle them, it will petrify them. You know, I've often been asked why I don't light my attic with electricity. Isn't that ridiculous? Everybody knows electricity is for chairs. Our little fairy tale tonight is called The 13th Guest. The 13 makes it timely, topical, and terrifying. It's about a humorous fellow who dies telling a joke. Something of a deadpan comedian. Here. Let me darken the room, and we shall commence.
How about the format of the show? What would a person expect to see on a typical?
Then, after that's the opening, and then I would say, then Vampira would say, hope you've had the good fortune to have had a perfectly miserable week, and I have a surprise for you. Tonight we are going to see, and then I'd enunciate the name of the film that we were going to show. Commercial, cut to commercial.
When he was gone, I was practically a prisoner in my own home. It's a whole new way of life.
And then when we open, we're on this main set, and we have about 5 segments with commercial breaks, about 5 breaks in the film.
And the film would typically be what sort of movie?
Typically, well, we were presumably we were showing sci-fi and horror. Presumably we were showing horror, but the good Universal films were not available. They were caught up somehow legally that they were not available for rent. We were able to get some few little horror films from, I think, Monogram kind of quality. Things like Voodoo Island.
They say nobody ever goes there and comes back.
No, Voodoo Island came later. We had White Zombie. We had Island of Lost Souls. We had The Frozen Dead. Films like that. But more often than not, we ran out of those films. There weren't that many available. We showed Raymond Chandler type detective stories and tried to pretend that they were horror, We did the best we could for what we could rent for $100.
I was on my way to the police station.
Yes, and baby, you're still on your way to the police station.
And how would you take a movie that was, say, a detective movie and pretend that it was like a horror film?
Well, my writer was a genius. Peter Robinson was a genius. He knew how to transpose that. But we would always say, if something happy happened on the thing, we'd say, "Oh, what a tragedy, that poor darling." Something good had happened to her. And of course, when miserable things happened, we would say, "Well, isn't that wonderful?" So we just sort of dumbly went on with it.
And there were sketches, too, weren't there?
Oh, yeah.
I came to Hollywood to find out how they make money.
Well, how do they make money?
Well, Vampira was like a one-woman Saturday Night Live. I did a lot of characters. I'd be, once I was Groucho Marx. She wore the eyebrows, you know. And, very quickly I would just do the illusion, you know how you do a little bit, suggest the character, pull the hair back very quickly, or put on spectacles if you're sometimes. Once when Jimmy Dean was on the show, I was a librarian. And I rapped his knuckles. He was a naughty boy.
Ask Iris to come in, will you?
Iris, boss wants you.
It was the time of Marilyn Monroe. Mila's buxom, appallingly narrow-waisted creation was, among other things, a Gothic parody of the national obsession with the hourglass figure. Vampira embodied feminine strength in the midst of a popular culture that exalted female submission. And with the baby boom detonating all around her, her impossible midriff made it seem as if she didn't have a womb.
You recorded physical dimensions in 1954. 38, 17, 36. How in the name of God did you keep your waist at 17 inches?
Oh, well, that was body sculpting and all kinds of tricks I used, but I didn't keep it that way. My waist was 17 on Saturday night, but on Monday, I didn't dare measure it. Because I was so hungry from 2 days of fasting that I would just, eat lots of food. But I used a lot of tricks. For one thing, I went to the steam bath every Friday night to dehydrate everything, right? And then I ate. When Friday morning I woke, I said, this is it, 2 days of fasting. I didn't eat anything Friday. Friday night, I steamed away. Saturday, I ate nothing, and then Saturday night, I cinched. And if I didn't do that, I wouldn't be able to get into my costume. So I was forced to do it, like it or no. I was forced to fast for 2 days. And I had, to get my waist down in the first place, I had invented a spot-reducing cream. I knew that steaks were tenderized with something that broke down the fiber, broke down the cells. And I thought if I found out what that was, maybe I could break down the living flesh. Yeah. And it was papaya powder. So I went and got some papaya powder and mixed it with my cold cream and slathered it on my waist and wrapped a rubber inner tube around. We didn't have plastic stuff then, So I wrapped this rubber around and slept in it. Well, it would perspire and open up the pores, and then it would eat this papaya powder, and I digested the flesh away.
Vampira came to the party so early that when she received her first tribute record, it came rockabilly style.
I got a woman, she's 6'3". Ooh, buddy, what she doing to me? She got loving and she's mighty strange. But Vampira, that's her name. Vampira, yeah, Vampira.
By 1954, World War II was a receding memory. Parents, shaped by the scarcity of the Great Depression, were raising their children in a time of unprecedented abundance. The first generation of American teenagers with disposable income in its pockets and leisure time on its hands was fueling a new pop culture economy. Its musical prophet was Bill Haley, who would be followed quickly by Elvis Presley and Chuck Berry. And its gospels were the hosted horror comics Tales from the Crypt and Vault of Horror, and the wild satiric panels of the early Mad magazine. It was a world so tailor-made for Vampira that Maila Nurmi might have stitched it together herself and worn it to the Bal Carib. But that revolution in sensibility, while imminent, hadn't quite happened yet. And that makes Maila Nurmi a pioneer.
Just how radical an idea was the whole Vampira show format character for 50s?
Well, it was unheard of. Fortunately for me, my producer was a brave and crazy young man. He had fanatic ideas, and I myself have little fanatic instincts deeply buried, and he brought them to the fore, so we worked well together. It was just unheard of. Society was alarmed and delighted.
The Vampira show was local and live in a time without videotape, which made it perishable regional TV. But Maila's background as a cheesecake model stood her in good stead. There are hundreds of publicity shots of her in character, and they form an important part of the Vampira legacy.
To me, it is like the godmother of goth. It is the godmother of the alternative movement in terms of the classic reigning beauty.
Gothic photographer Gabrielle Geiselman.
The long dark hair, that silky, the curve, the corseting. I mean, huge movements have come out of this. She affected so many different elements, down to the nails, down to the shoes. If you think about it and you really start picking it apart, you realize she's the original. She's absolutely the original. And yes, she is an amalgamation of all these different things that came before her, but she's the first person who put it together and made it dangerous.
In still photos, Vampira is the antithesis of the famous 50s fetish model Betty Page. Page's appeal has been described as her ability to maintain a girl-next-door wholesomeness in squalid contexts. Vampira never wields a whip, and she's far too imperious for some smut peddler to bind or gag. Instead, she fills the most mundane settings with sexual tension and black comedy.
You'll never guess what this sauce is for the baked ham.
I've had several letters asking whether olives or cherries should be used in making my cocktail.
Equal parts of grape jelly and light mustard, blended and simmered.
However, if you want to use some garnish, you can drop in an eyeball, if you happen to have an extra one around the house.
Both Page and Nurmi embodied the contradictions of an era that venerated the American female, but saw her as a virtual house slave. If Betty Page somehow brought 50s ideas about female purity into the dungeon, Vampira brought the dungeon into the living room, the kitchen, and onto the welcome mat where her presumably cowering house guests wiped their feet. The power of these images is the only possible explanation for a small local show's unprecedented popularity.
This mighty new transmitting tower makes KABC one of the most powerful television stations in all the West.
What kind of impact did the Vampira show have?
I think the world stood still.
Even this mighty tower shook to its very foundations when a bizarre, offbeat, mysterious image was first telecast just a few weeks ago.
Got fan mail from all over the world. I don't think that's happened even yet from a local show.
And no wonder. The image was that of KABC's internationally acclaimed glamour ghoul, Vampira.
The studio did not spend money to advertise because everybody automatically wrote about it. She advertised herself,
Her impact on televiewers has been fantastic.
Writers just journalists wanted to remark on it and comment on it. So we got lots of press without having to buy any.
Now, 3 short weeks after Vampira's first scary airing, Newsweek magazine told the nation about her Saturday night fret together. After 6 weeks, Life magazine devoted 3 big pages of pictures and story to Vampira. And worldwide publicity in French, English, and Australian newspapers and magazines is now being topped by a full-page spread in the Sunday edition of the New York Daily News. And all because of this sweet, lovable little key named Vampira.
People were just astonished we got into Life magazine.
Which I've seen, which it shows you on the set and in the Vampira character.
Mm-hmm.
And the important thing to remember, I think, for people who might see that reprinted or something, is we're talking about a local show.
Oh, that's unusual, I guess, for a local show.
Yeah, national magazine audience is getting these photos, and most of whom don't have the show available to them, right?
Right.
So that's an amazing demonstration of the character's impact.
Oh, yes.
Her theme song is Meet Me Tonight in Screamland.
How about locally? How did things change for you around town?
Well, I became the girl of the minute. If you can imagine what Pamela Anderson was when she first burst forth on Baywatch. You know, I was the #1 item around for 5 minutes. Everybody, firstly, we didn't reveal my identity. She remained mysterious. And under all that makeup, who is under there? Everybody wanted to know, who is that really? And we didn't tell, you know, for a while. So we kept, so that everybody wanted to know who really is under that in that costume, who's under there. So everybody would have, almost anybody in town would have invited me in for a moment to a dinner party, just long enough to find out who I was at least, you know.
Next Sunday, see Dateline Disneyland on ABC Television Network.
Busy you, in and out of doors every day. Think how much dust and dirt settle on your skin. That's why cleansing tests were made by an independent testing laboratory. This same kind of dirt was made just radioactive enough to register on a Geiger counter. Leading cleansing creams were used to remove this dirt. The Geiger counter proved that Dorothy Gray Cell-On Cold Cream...
Screaming really nasty, so...
Sort of the received mindset about what the 50s were like is that it was a very repressive time. And here you are doing a character who is based in part on a bondage magazine, who is overtly sexual, who is a combination of sex and death, all these interesting psychological cross-currents, and it comes out, and in the market that it's in, boom, it's this explosion. Why do you think that is, given the culture of the time?
Well, it was time for a revolution, a cultural revolution, right? And this was one of the early missives fired out. Women were kicking their shoes off and running about barefooted. All over town, women were kicking their shoes off. We wore very confined shoes that were stiff leather and with pointed toes, and our feet hurt. I mean, it was just a symbol of the times that they were kicking their shoes off. You know, prior to that, they had just suffered the pain. I know with me, it was just, I was rebelling, you know, intense. It was a violent rebellion because I was utterly stifled by the contrition everywhere, contrition. You know, everything was so corseted. Ugh, I hated it. And I was not alone. Obviously, this whole thing was seething. You know, people wanted to be unloosed. They wanted some freedom. Freedom of expression, freedom of everything, you know. Less hairspray.
In the town of Basic, isn't that a surprise to hear these type of noises? But with the advanced rear automatic braking of the Nissan Rogue, the unexpected can be music to your ears. Anything but basic. The 2022 Nissan Rogue. Get low APR financing plus no payments for 90 days on Rogue with best-in-class fuel economy.
I like to boost it, my vitamins can boost it. I like to boost it, we like to boost it.
Boost, a fizzing amazing vitamin boost.
Boost it.
You better move if you wanna go. Go ahead, yeah, on a roll. Turn up, yeah, listen to it. You better do it if you're gonna do it. Yeah, I never seen something like this, no. Never seen nothing.
It's your
like
journey.
this.
Own every mile in the Hyundai Tucson. Get 2.99% APR for 48 months on the Tucson with new inventory arriving daily. Visit buyhyundai.com today.
You know how serious the juvenile delinquency problem has become. The question is, what makes kids from nice homes do things like this?
You're tearing me apart!
What?
You say one thing, he says another, and everybody changes back again!
At the height of her own personal, professional, and televisual revolution, Maila Nurmi found a kindred spirit in another enduring icon of rebellion, actor James Dean.
There were other people. Why should you be the only one involved?
But I am involved. We are all involved. Mom!
Theirs was a passionate friendship, not a romance, and it needs to be defended before it can be defined. A lot has been written and said about the Maila-Dean relationship, including a 50s scandal sheet article so outrageous. Maila told me she attempted suicide when it came out. During the long period when she was a forgotten figure, Maila was accused by some of exploiting Dean's memory.
Tonight is really show business, isn't it?
Hedda Hopper quoted the dead actor as saying he had befriended Maila because of his studies of the Golden Bough and the Marquis de Sade. But he dropped her when he, quote, found her void of any true interest except her Vampira makeup. If Dean actually said that, and if we can assume that Dean was being sincere and revealing while talking to one of the most powerful gossip columnists in Hollywood, he was rewriting his personal history. Because here are some facts. Dean's intense interest in Gothic icons went all the way back to his high school acting days, where he scored a big hit, not only by playing the Frankenstein monster in a review, but for devising the makeup himself. There is also an extant photo of Dean gooning around in full Boris Karloff Frankenstein makeup with Vampira sidekick and close personal pal Jack Simmons. Hardly an image of Dean and Maila conversing about Proust. A memo in the Warner Brothers archives also mentions a set visit from one Vampira when Dean was shooting Rebel Without a Cause. And the scandal sheet article Maila said perverted public perceptions? That exists too. On a personal note, I have to say that anybody who knew Maila at all knows she felt Dean's absence as an enduring loss. During the interview, she was wearing a large crucifix that dangled just out of frame.
Can't get to my brassiere strap. There, I got it.
She touched it when she spoke about him, and her eyes were full of tears. In mid-50s Hollywood, there was a pecking order.
Hello, Lauren. How are you?
I'm wonderful, thank you.
And this is Lauren Bacall, ladies and gentlemen, as if I had to tell you.
At the bottom were upstarts like Maila and James Dean.
You were kind of then in the vanguard of this next generation of attitude and talent that came in and came of age here in Hollywood. I wonder, at the time, was there any sense that the old guard was looking askance, that there was a kind of a generational?
Oh, it was very pronounced. It was very pronounced. And we saw it most clearly at Googie's, which was next to Schwab's, because the old guard was in Schwab still. They were established, big money actors. They would do their business there and hang out there. And the new guard, the new people that came from New York, came from Broadway, hung out in Googie's. And we were ready to have a rumble, the Googieites and the Schwabaroonies. Ready to have a rumble. They were frightened. And at Villa Capri, Humphrey Bogart and the Rat Pack were terrified of Jimmy Dean when East of Eden was sneaked. Terrified of him.
Yes, life in its every emotion leaps from the pages of John Steinbeck's best of all his bestsellers.
Their careers were sinking, and he was the harbinger of the new things to come.
Warner Brothers had to seek out vibrant new personalities, tap new sources of talent, create new stars. James Dean as Cal.
They were cruel to him.
Really? In what way?
They called him over to their table and he said to us, he was sitting with us, he said, oh, the movie stars want me. I'm going to see the movie star. I'm going to sit with the movie star. He was so happy. He went and sat with him and they tore him to pieces. He was in tears and they continued to attack him.
There are just thousands and thousands of people here at this fantastic opening at the Pantages Theater.
I asked Maila how she met Dean and got a surprisingly metaphysical response.
Well, we knew one another long ago in another life, of course, maybe many other lives, but in this life, I went to a premiere, a Hollywood premiere. I went as a viewer alone, and I sat in the bleachers with a little camera. I went as a fan. I went to observe the scene because I thought, now that I have the key to the city, I want to see what the city is made of. I'll see where I want to use this key. And there was nobody I wanted to meet. I saw many people I wanted not to meet. And there was nobody I wanted to meet except one fellow. He arrived escorting Terry Moore. And he was very uncomfortably wearing. He was uncomfortable in a tuxedo, in a rented tuxedo. And his cowlick was unmanageable. And he was surly and angry, and I wanted to meet him, and that was James Dean. Of course, I didn't know then who it was. But the next day, when I was in a coffee shop, he came in, as it were, and instantly we were magnetized to one another, psychically drawn. karmically drawn. We recognized one another. We knew one another instantly, thoroughly, throughout, and forever. Each of us was brave and terrified at one and the same time. It's a sketchy thing. You're terrified, but you overcome your terror because there are inclinations in you that you can't stop, to become rebellious and make trouble for yourself. That isn't why you do it, but you, as a sideline, you make trouble for yourself. We saw that in one another immediately. We knew we were the same kind of soldiers and how few of us there were, and we needed to stick together.
As one dean was entering her life, another dean was leaving. After 6 years, Maila's relationship with Dean Reisner was dissolving in chaos and volatility. He feared she was unfaithful. She claimed he neglected her. Denials all around. But everyone agreed. Overnight fame hadn't made things easy. He had named Vampira, but she was never going to be community property. Maila was at her absolute zenith as a TV personality. KABC was pushing Vampira to sponsors as flagship programming, the key to advertising success. But their interest in the character went even deeper. By year's end, the station would be paying Maila the ultimate showbiz compliment by ripping off her act. A new hosted movie program took to the air, built around cheap romantic films this time, and another outrageous female character.
At that time, Vampira was on, and I said I could be the opposite of her.
Enter Voluptua, the self-described love goddess, who greeted the camera each week in her mink-lined boudoir like a woman joining a lover for a clandestine quickie. Voluptua actress Gloria Paul reenacts a typical show opening as Voluptua enters, breathing heavily.
I'm not breathless from hurrying here for our date. I'm breathless because I know the date is with you. Welcome to my boudoir. I want you to feel that it's your special hideaway. So relax. Take off your shoes. Loosen your tie. Together, you and I are going to be good friends.
Paul was a lively and pneumatic young beauty who shared Maila's background in cheesecake modeling and as a showgirl, but with none of Maila's interests in bohemianism or satire. Voluptua made the sexual subtext of the Vampira show into the whole act. Ironically, given that Paul herself was a far tougher cookie than Maila could ever be, Voluptua was all yielding sexual compliance.
I was in their living room, I was in their bedroom, and I was being very nice to them, and I spoke softly, and they loved it. They ate it up.
The show itself is entirely lost, but KABC got Life magazine to give Voluptua the full Vampira treatment. The surviving photos depict a program that might be considered provocative even today, with Voluptua stripping in silhouette behind a translucent screen as she slips into something more comfortable.
I never did figure out what was so terrible about what I did, because I never saw it. I never saw any kind of playback. I never saw a kinescope. I never saw anything except what were in the magazines, and I was in many, many magazines with Voluptua.
By show's end, Voluptua wore nothing more than panties and a man's pajama top. Whatever she'd been up to, she hadn't been watching the movie. She kissed the camera itself goodnight.
Mwah.
To make the connection between Vampira and Voluptua overt, KABC promoted them as the chill and charm girls, but the lack of a satiric element gave Paul nowhere to hide. Outraged moralists got the show canceled in just 7 weeks.
He says, "You are being canceled." I says, "Why? What did I do wrong?" He says, "Tremendous amount of protests. They have renamed you Corruptua instead of Voluptua. The FCC has threatened to turn the studio into a parking lot if we don't get rid of you."
Meanwhile, national press attention and cult celebrity meant bigger and better opportunities for Maila Nurmi. The first was on June 15, 1954, 1 week after Vampira's Life magazine spread was published.
Halloween, Halloween.
The Red Skelton Show was a major CBS program where Vampira was seen for the first time by a national audience.
I don't know. It seemed like television has sort of changed Halloween.
She was paired in a vampire-themed mad scientist sketch with another great Gothic icon, the greatest of them, in fact, Dracula actor Bela Lugosi, now in the hard-scrabble twilight of his long and varied career. It was the only time they ever worked together, but not the only time they were co-stars. A cross-dressing sweater fetishist and shoestring filmmaker named Ed Wood would see to that. For many years, Maila's skeleton show appearance was presumed lost. But in 2014, the Skeleton Estate located the program and rewrote movie monster history in the process.
Please, you're making enough noise to wake the living.
I think there's somebody coming. Yes, it's my sister, Vampira.
The episode-length sketch is a mashup of Skeleton's popular movie comedy, The Fuller Brush Man.
Pardon me, is the lady of the house in? I'm your neighborhood brush salesman.
Plus plot devices borrowed from Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
We're lucky that the salesman came to our house and to our door.
Lugosi's sidekick is another legend, Lon Chaney Jr., on hand to kid his signature role as the Wolf Man.
I've been to the dentist. These here are just temporary fillings.
Maila stands out for what she isn't doing. She's not playing it for laughs.
Would you like to go out with me after you're dead?
Would I like to go out with you? Now is your chance to send the kids out of the room.
I like you.
You do?
Yes, you're just my type.
You mean I'm breathing?
A red-blooded American boy.
Yeah. This is a physical impossibility.
Why don't you invite me over sometime when you cut yourself shaving?
Oh, let's not get sickening about it. Look, I don't even... You better get home. It's getting late. Why don't you go? Where do you live, anyhow?
Here.
Here? Well, I like the way you keep your lawn.
This won't hurt a bit.
What you gonna do? Are you... Are you kidding?
Unfazed by her growing celebrity, Vampira's name and her dignity remain intact.
I don't even know you. I haven't been introduced yet. I don't go out with strangers, you know.
I'm Vampira, the ghoul.
What if you were in charge of your child's education? Wouldn't you choose safe, consistent learning from state-certified teachers? How about classes that bubble over into fun and let your child learn at their own pace? What about a tuition-free online school that doesn't leave parents on the sidelines? Welcome to K-12. We've been doing this for more than 20 years. What are you waiting for? Take charge at K12.com. Enroll today.
Saturday, it's Baseball Night in America on Fox. Carlos Correa powers the AL Central leading Twins.
Oh, what a catch!
Against MVP candidate Manny Machado and the Padres.
That is a monster shot!
Or it's an NL battle as Kyle Schwarber and the Phillies take on the Pirates. It's Baseball Night in America next Saturday at 7 Eastern on Fox.
When the Skeleton Show aired, the Vampira Show had been on the air for just 6 weeks. On August 7th, Vampira appeared on NBC's Saturday Night Review opposite Ben Blue, a rubber-faced comic with a specialty in beleaguered husbands.
My mother told me not to marry. I want to
A draft of Vampira's Saturday Night Review contract survives, and it's a strange document. There's no agent or lawyer indicated to represent Maila's interests, and the performer designation is left blank. Check payable to Vampira, care of KABC's program director, the man who discovered Maila in her self-made costume at the Bal Carib. Otherwise, it appears to be a legally binding agreement between a major corporation and a fictional character. This copy was never executed, so it's impossible to know if the contract seen here was ever finalized. The situation may descend from Maila's original deal memo with KABC, a brief document that openly acknowledges there will be more negotiations in the future. Maila can play her character on national TV. KABC can refuse her the right to do so. No problem, if everyone stays friends. Saturday Night Review was second-tier national TV. But for Vampira and company, opportunity was everywhere.
Yes, thanks to television, that marvel of modern science, millions of other people can sit back in the comfort of their own homes.
It was the start of a TV renaissance, and Maila wasn't the only one ready to make the most of it.
Good evening. I am Ronald Reagan speaking for General Electric.
At the peak of Maila's friendship with James Dean, Dean appeared live on the CBS anthology series General Electric Theater as a beat-crazy gangster who takes a small-town doctor hostage and orders him to patch a bullet hole in the belly of his partner in crime.
This is a gun, man. I'm a big man. Take a good look at it. I'm a big man.
The Dark, Dark Hours is easily the most culturally fraught of Dean's surviving TV appearances because his adversary is played by conservative icon and future president Ronald Reagan.
I want you to take your hands off my wife and get out of this house.
Vampira's sidekick Jack Simmons appears as the dying Pee-wee. It's the kind of showy supporting part Maila had begged Dean to give Simmons for months.
I'm suspicious, Dad. I trust you. I don't trust Vanya. Oh no, what am I gonna do with this idea?
It's Reagan's show, so Reagan comes out on top.
I'm not afraid to use this!
I don't know whether to beat you or kill you.
But Dean is electrifying as the kind of troubled youth he was born to play.
I don't even care, but if I can't be the best, I'm gonna be the worst, huh? And I'm gonna tell you one thing. No one's gonna look at me again like I'm a piece of dirt.
The Dark, Dark Hours plays today as a test drive for the rebel without a cause persona that made Dean an enduring star.
Television City.
The Dark, Dark Hours was also the occasion for another of Maila's accidental brushes with history, when she dined with Reagan and Dean at the CBS commissary during rehearsals. They were three American icons who had yet to become iconic. Maila's opinion, recounted in her private journal afterwards, was that Reagan looked and acted as though he should have been selling insurance.
So until next Sunday at the same time, good night for General Electric.
Live broadcasting made it possible for Maila to watch James Dean's TV appearances as they happened. But she never saw any of her own. Maila was always frustrated that so little of her work was preserved. She never stopped hoping more Vampira footage would surface. In December of 2011, it finally did. 2 lost kinescopes were located by this project, a game show appearance, and a pivotal 1955 performance on NBC's George Gobel show, a top 10 hit seen by millions.
With his guest, Vampira.
Excavated for this project after 57 years, the Gobel footage had an estimated audience of 10.8 million viewers on the night it was broadcast. For this reason, it represents the largest audience Maila as Vampira would ever reach.
Young man, who are you?
What is this?
Won't you come in, Mr. Goble? We can have a nice little... Ow! Step on the cat's tail.
I don't see any cat.
Oh, we don't have a cat. Just his tail. Do you mind if I smoke?
No, not at all. Go right ahead.
Thank you.
There are layers here uncommon for the time. Vampira is the actress in the sketch, not the role.
Just a moment. Let me introduce myself. I'm Mrs. Jones.
Just plain Mrs. Jones.
Just plain Mrs. Jones. Just like the Mrs. Jones who lives next door on any street in America.
This makes Vampira real in a sense, at least in the syntax of the show.
Say, Mrs. Jones, did anybody ever tell you that you look like,
Vampira?
Yeah.
No.
Goebel vocalist Peggy King has said she enjoyed working with Vampira, but that she never met Maila, because Maila stayed in character throughout the rehearsals, as well as during the broadcast. This duality was even more explicit on the reality-based game show Place the Face with Vampira, not Maila, guessing the man from her past.
Did you irritate me in any way?
Possibly, yes.
Did I irritate you?
Oh, no.
Well, that's a pity.
Yeah.
Blood.
That's it. You know what? You know
He
where?
took some for me.
That
Tommy,
is right.
For the Red Cross.
That's right. Jerry Sprague, a laboratory technician. Come on out.
Vampira gave interviews in character. She went to industry parties. KABC provided an antique car, so Vampira could appear at random all over Los Angeles, provoking havoc in street theater wherever she went.
May I ask you a question, Miss Vampira?
Yeah, surely.
Is that really your waist, or do you come in two sections?
2 sections. I'm kind of a do-it-myself kit.
Oh.
Bye.
For as long as I knew her, Maila always referred to Vampira in the third person, as a she, not a me. We are dangerously close to performance art here, something deeper than an act. It gave her creation power, and ultimately a life of its own, but it was psychologically tricky terrain. Because if Vampira is real, where's Maila in this picture? Who's wearing whom?
But now I was a professional vampire or something. It seemed I'd gone to a masquerade party in 1953, and the costume I wore stuck to me. For 11 years I tried to scrape it off, peel it off, burn it off with acid. Finally gave up trying. Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm on a diet of lizard's legs and grasshopper squeezing. You can imagine, it wasn't easy.
If Maila was having trouble with the blurred lines between herself and her creation, Vampira had no such problem. 6 months after she first appeared on The Skelton Show, Vampira was already replicating herself. The sketch is a satire of Jackie Gleason's The Honeymooners, modified in honor of guest Peter Lorre to include a few gothic touches.
One of these days. Pow! Right in the kisser!
One of them appears to be Maila Nurmi dressed as Vampira.
Where have you been?
Same as usual, driving a hearse.
Lucky you. You have all the fun.
Fun, she calls it.
But Vampira is heavier than usual, and her makeup is wrong.
Poor dear, you ought to sit down.
Because it isn't Maila, though she would certainly have taken the gig had it been offered to her.
Aren't they touching? I think we should have a waltz.
Is this parody, tribute, or something more ominous? All of the above, I guess. So you decide. To cap off her incredible year, Maila received an Emmy nomination as the most outstanding female television personality of 1954.
And the nominees for the Best Situation Comedy are...
She lost, but given the limited broadcast reach of her program, it really was an honor just to be nominated.
I Love Lucy.
It was once upon a time. After years of scrambling, Maila's future seemed assured. It didn't work out that way. Midnight struck hard, and then it wouldn't leave. Just 18 months after the March 1955 Emmy Awards ceremony, Maila had already entered into the long twilight of her public career. The Vampira show had been canceled, not once, but twice, and by two separate LA TV stations. James Dean was dead in a car crash at age 24, but not before his meteoric rise had driven a wedge between him and Maila, who had initially been the bigger star. Vampira, the girl of the minute in the summer of 1954, was in semi-retirement, a nostalgia act, trotted out for a steadily dwindling series of local promotional appearances. Vampira opened car dealerships. She rode in USC's homecoming parade. In an irony that couldn't have escaped Maila given her psychological widowhood and Dean's automotive demise, she was even paired for a California traffic safety campaign opposite comedy drunk Doodles Weaver. Newly divorced and reduced to living on $13 a week, Maila spent less than a day wandering around a cardboard cemetery for writer-director Ed Wood, who was cobbling together a patchwork science fiction epic called Grave Robbers from Outer Space.
What was Ed Wood like, Maila?
I know only as how I perceived him and what I have learned. I've learned so much about him after the fact, right? But as I perceived him then, I just thought he was like a failed Robert Taylor. He was very, very pretty. His mother had wanted a girl and had raised him like the pretty little boy that he was. And so he was lovely, lovely looking when he was young and healthy. And glamorous. He had an old-fashioned romantic gentility about him that added to the glamour. He really should have been a movie star. But of course he didn't miss his calling. I suppose he really was meant to be what he was. I envy people like that, like a one-cell amoeba, you know. I want, I take, I patch, I make, you know, a simpleton, you know, but with a lot of drive and persistence. And I marvel at that fortitude. But then it isn't, it's different for some people. If you're built to bear it, you're built to bear it. Some people just aren't. You know, he wasn't one of those people that if you looked at him cross-eyed, he'd go and hide in a closet for 6 months. Apparently, he wasn't one of those people.
It was, by any professional measure, the bottom of the barrel. Stock footage, wobbly miniature UFOs, and some plotless shots of Wood's dead friend Bela Lugosi posturing in his Dracula outfit were fitted to some briskly filmed scenes featuring Wood's stock company of Hollywood outcasts.
And remember, my friend, future events such as these will affect you in the future.
What kind of importance did Ed Wood have in 1950, whatever?
None. He was pitied, if anybody thought of him at all. I say he was pitied if remembered at all. I mean, nobody took note of him. He was just an object of... No, he had no importance.
The week she filmed her Plan 9 scenes, Maila also booked a 2-session modeling job at Walt Disney's studio. Disney animators were stuck on the design for an evil witch, so Maila was brought in to provide visual inspiration for Maleficent, the iconic villainess from Sleeping Beauty. In 2014, I investigated the rumor Maila posed for Maleficent for Salon.com. In response to my queries, Disney confirmed Maila's participation for the first time, 58 years after her Maleficent modeling sessions. The email I received from the director of the Walt Disney Archives reads in part, "Good news. I am able to confirm she did indeed come into the studio to do live-action reference for Maleficent." Like so much of Maila's legacy, any footage or photos of her performing Maleficent appear to be lost.
When you first met K-12, you were one of the more than 2 million students who took charge of their education, tackling the challenges you set for yourself and ready for all the new ones to come. Here, you were someone, and you could become anyone. Our commitment was to help you get where you want to be. Congratulations, graduates.
Take charge of your future at k12.com/ready.
Meet Leon the Third, Leon the Second, and Leon the First of them all. 3 generations who all bank differently with Chase. Leon's saving up for his first set of wheels. Nice try. Really? This Leon's paying for his paint job on the spot. And this Leon, as a Chase private client, he's in the south of France taking out cash with no ATM fees. That's because this family of Leons has Chase.
Actually, it's Leon.
Ooh la la. One bank for now, for later, for life. Chase, make more of what's yours.
Eros, the Earth people are getting closer to that which we fear. Since they will not listen or respect our existence, they cannot help but believe our powers when they see their own dead walking round again, brought about by our advancement and such things. As soon as you have enough of the dead recruits, march them on the capitals of the earth. Let nothing stand in your way. Their own dead will be used to make them accept our existence and believe in that fact.
The details of Maila's fall from favor are alternately frightening and fascinating. But the details don't necessarily contain all the reasons. For those, we need to jump ahead to 1959, the year Ed Wood's much-delayed masterwork finally hit a few scattered movie houses under its new title of Plan 9 from Outer Space, and then sank without a trace. That same year, Maila appeared in a low-budget film noir called The Beat Generation as a beat poetess, the closest she ever came to appearing as Maila Nurmi in a movie. In her key scene, Maila cradles a rat and recites an anti-parental beat poem called Upon a Certain Birthday. The police whistle at the top had to be Maila's idea, her surrogate for Vampira's scream.
Dear parents, we do not thank you, dear fumbling mother and father, both, upon this miserable occasion. Now is our time, through the beat way of life, our force of kicks, unending kicks.
Latter-day Vampira fans have circulated the scene with Maila's reading cut in continuity. That's not the way it appeared in the movie. The Beats are the villains in The Beat Generation, with the hero cops standing in for the audience and expressing mainstream contempt, while another denizen of the beat scene is out raping the lead cop's wife.
What do you make of these beat characters?
A bunch of phony pseudo-intellectuals jumping on the gravy train of rebellion. I guess we've always had them. Fake bohemia. I don't know, maybe I'm getting old, Jakey, but they bore me.
If you accept Maila Nurmi as an accidental rebel, the forces of reaction become real too. They were right there in the room with her, in this most interesting of her big screen appearances. And they vilified her. As the film and television work dried up and personal appearances became fewer and farther in between, Maila sank into poverty. She did odd jobs to stay afloat, including cleaning friends' houses. A 1962 Where Are They Now article found her installing linoleum. Other journalists bumped into her in a restaurant, working in exchange for food. she opened a small shop called Vampira's Attic, where she sold handmade jewelry and celebrity gravestone rubbings. When that business failed, she became destitute. Voluptua actress Gloria Paul got a rare glimpse of Maila's life during this period.
I ran into her someplace one time. She was having a real hard time financially because she couldn't get going anywhere else. She had a half of a garage, a 10 by 20 room in back of a building that was going to be torn down. Her little room was wall-to-wall boxes, and I think she slept on the floor. So the next time I went over there with a whole big bag of food, she wouldn't answer the door. And I can tell she was home because the screen was locked from the inside. And I hung some eggs and some bread and there were all kinds of hangers to hang stuff on her screen door. And that's what people used to do. They used to come over and bring her food because she was so impoverished.
Our little fairy tale tonight is called The 13th Guest.
There was one type of fan who was slow to abandon her. The Vampira character had always attracted a certain amount of unwholesome attention. Stalkers, we'd call them today. As early as 1955, there was an LA newspaper account of Maila being molested in public by a crazed fan. The attacker was arrested, but the reporter wrote it up as comedy. Vampira was a cartoon character, and cartoons don't have feelings. "Clutching hand brings screams from Vampira," the headline read. These sorts of encounters would continue long after Maila had faded from public view. Maila brought it up herself and even joked about it on camera.
I shouldn't say they didn't approach me, because there were people who approached me because of Vampira, but they didn't behave like fans. I suppose there was an inverted fandom. They came to terrorize me, and they came to prepare me for an act of necrophilia on their part. You know, they came to...
You had some obsessed fans.
Oh, they were only obsessive people. Nobody else approached me, yeah. And at the full of the moon, I was surrounded by lunatics. The ranks have grown over the years, you know, there are more people. And of course, I personally am not attacked because I'm an old woman now, but very few people try to thrust their tongues down my throat anymore. But, God, it's been 6 months, I think.
I knew these stories already, and that they remained painful to her. I can remember wanting to protect her from saying too much in front of the crew. The worst incident came after Maila's first cancellation, when she fled to New York to seek new opportunities. A man named Ellis Barber, who'd never heard of Vampira, broke into Maila's apartment, beat and choked her, cut off her clothes with a straight razor, and told her, "You'll be dead by morning." The ordeal lasted 2 hours before she escaped, nude and bleeding, and got help. Maila told me her attacker dragged her up and down a flight of stairs several times. She dated her problems with walking from that night. At the police station, after Barber was captured, Maila's minor notoriety brought the photographers running. And Maila, in shock and on autopilot, climbed on top of a desk and modeled her bruises. I find these images to be the most disturbing ones Maila ever posed for. The horrors were real ones, all fists and no punchlines. And there is something in her odd blend of defiance and submission as the old cheesecake modeling muscle reasserts itself that seems to say, "Is this what you wanted from me? Is this what you came for in the end?" I asked Maila over lunch once if she ever wished Vampira never happened. Here's what Maila said. "I realized that she was very expensive, that there was more on the red side of the ledger than the black. There were more negatives than positives, seemingly. But the positives were important enough to me that no, I have no regrets. But there's something strange with the character. It wasn't just me, it was Vampira, if that's possible. I think it called forth the devil. I believe in Satan, I do believe he exists, and I had to wait until he forgot about me eventually, and went back into his box." In the manic parabola Mila's life had become, there was a final grace note. In 1956, as a warm-up for Vampira's return to TV, Maila co-starred opposite headliner Liberace in the live Las Vegas revue, Come As You Were. Despite the chaos enveloping her, Maila rose to the occasion, momentarily convinced she'd made a comeback. She was proved wrong, but I've always been glad she got one last hurrah. And that it was fun while it lasted. And oh yeah, while she was in Vegas, she had a date with Elvis Presley. In a real sense, the closest companion of Maila's lost years was an absent one. The streaking comet she befriended when he was an unknown up-and-comer named Jimmy Dean. Maila had unconventional spiritual beliefs and strong powers of imagination. Hollywood astrologer Sidney Omar once marveled in print over Maila's, quote, apparent psychic abilities. Well, maybe. This stuff is easily mocked by those who worship at other tabernacles. But the central psychological predicament wasn't too uncommon. Intense and protracted grief, made endurable by the belief a departed loved one remained an active spiritual force in her life. The world did its part to keep Dean's image before her. One of the more poignant of Maila's anecdotes finds her visiting with the car Dean died in when it was put on show in Los Angeles, ostensibly to encourage safer driving. Maila was appalled to see Dean's fans tearing pieces off the wreckage. She fled the display in tears. I had noticed Maila was often most revealing about herself when talking about Dean, so I asked her to describe at length the day he died as she experienced it. She did so in lavish detail.
Jack Simmons and I had been riding in his car along Sunset late in the day on September 30th, 1955.
But she stopped short of what I was looking for, and I decided to confront her about it.
I want him alive again so I can beat him to death.
That was a very lovely and specific answer to what I had asked you.
But not what you had in mind.
No, much of it is. But there seems to me to be one really fundamental thing missing, which is how you felt.
Oh, how I felt. That's right. I didn't mention how I felt. You didn't ask me.
Are we really? How did you feel?
Well, how did I feel? I was stunned and incredulous, naturally. Except that there's another strange element, too. So it was all so unreal because Jimmy had repeatedly, to everybody, suggested that he was going to die momentarily and of a broken neck. So I was stunned in so many ways. You know, it's incredulous when somebody that is so intensely alive, more intensely alive. He has as much life energy as 100 people. I mean, he was a very, very intensely alive entity. And to be suddenly told that he is no more, he's dead, period, that's it. It was just incredible. But then there's the fact that he had been telling us that he was going to die, and we all sensed it must be so because he was playing Russian roulette. So I wasn't sad yet, not instantly when I heard it, because I was in shock. I didn't sleep or eat for 6 days. I couldn't eat. You know, I'd want to eat. People, you know, after a few days, people said, you know, you have to eat. So you put a bowl of soup before you, and you look at the soup, and you say, yes, I must eat, and you pick up the spoon, and you cannot eat. Because I felt my loved one, he can never eat again. Why should I? Who am I? You know. This is strange sensations that you have. But then about 6 days later, tears started, and they flowed for 6 months.
Why do you think Dean's screen persona spoke so deeply to the young people of the 1950s? What was different about the kids that came of age after the war as opposed to the people that had come before?
I don't know. I know what they needed from him, and I don't know why they needed it more than other kids earlier. I know they needed the preteens now who were just coming into adulthood, felt more alienated from their parents than they ever had before, I think. I mean, they were just extremely felt very alienated and had nowhere to turn. And because I think youth groups weren't organized or anything, they had nowhere to turn. And so Jimmy came along as a sort of rosary bead for them, something, you know, the Jim Stark character came along as someone for them to confide in. They could secretly take him into their hearts and feel that they were his confidant. And so if they couldn't turn to their parents, they could think of Jim Stark and tell him. It was a need, but I don't know why they had that need more than before the war. I don't know why.
Because when you say that you and he recognized each other as soldiers and that there were so few of you, within only a very short time after his death, there'd be millions of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
There'd be 1 million soldiers fighting on that side.
Yeah, but still, and it's more than that too, because Jimmy was from another planet, and so was I. But then there are a lot of those people too. You know, he was the little prince. I don't know which planet I came from, but that's what we both were. We were both aliens stranded here. Couldn't find our way back to the planet. We didn't know how we got here, but we at least could commiserate. Hi, stranger, I know how you feel. You can't find your planet. Right? You know, so of course it was comfortable. But now there are a lot of those people who feel alienated on Earth. Lots of them.
Yep.
Shortly after Dean's death, the confidential magazine-style scandal sheet called Whisper ran an article titled James Dean's Black Madonna, with Dean and Maila as Vampira splashed across the cover. In what Whisper called the most chilling and tragic love story in Hollywood history, Dean's death was linked to Maila's supposed witchery. The article caused a sensation. In the climate of fan hysteria, the blurred line between character and actress made it easy to pin Dean's death on a spooky regional celebrity and her, quote, black magic TV show. It was a lasting wound to her, and much of her later campaign to insist on Dean's closeness can be viewed as an attempt to rectify it.
How much money did you make off the Vampira character when she was on the air?
Well, my take home from the studio was $59.60 a week, you know, after taxes. And I spent all of that on body makeup and taxi cabs. But my husband supported me. Fortunately, he was earning some money.
And how long did the show run for? How many?
On Channel 7, I did 54 segments, so that's a year and 2 weeks. But then I was, a year and a half later, I was on Channel 9 for 13 weeks.
And how was it that the ending of the show came about?
Well, ABC hadn't initially wanted to do. My program director, who discovered me, wanted to do it, but the executives said, no, what is this, you know? So we had to persuade them. And so we were able to persuade them because it was a dead time slot late at night, a dead time slot we go on, right? And very little money. So, all right, something to dress up the trash at midnight, you know? So they allowed us to be on, but they wouldn't go for the expense of it, the entire Addams family, you know. But now when they saw it was the most successful thing on the station. On Halloween we got 2,000 phone calls from housewives wanting to know how to dress as Vampira. And so they realized that vampires on television were indeed very good. So then they decided that they needed to own the concept. And they were leasing it from me. They were leasing 49%. It was my idea to give them 49%. I wanted to give them as much as I possibly could without losing control, because I appreciated the fact that they were taking me out of obscurity. But then they decided they wanted to own it and put me out of commission. So they did.
When you're facing down debt, where do you turn? There are plenty of lenders, plenty of personal loans, but are they right for you? Karma Confidence Technology shows curated personal loans with outstanding chances of approval from up to 25 trusted lenders. And members save an average of 27% on interest rates when they compare personal loans on Credit Karma. Boom. Download the app and apply with Karma Confidence now.
Over 50% of high school students do not feel positive about their college or career readiness. Not our Sydney. She's been waiting for this day since 9th grade. Of all the K-12 career paths Sydney explored in high school, the health services path was perfect. She worked hard to get the skills and the certifications. Now she's ready to do the work and help save lives. That's our Sydney. She's future built.
Make sure your child is ready for tomorrow. Go to k12.com/prep.
What happened to you after the show was over?
Well, I had very low self-esteem. Still, I guess, but I had even more so. It was worse then. And when I got blacklisted, I took it very personally. I thought people find me objectionable. So I hid my head. I mean, I hid myself altogether. I went into reclusion.
Should we take a break for a second?
Sure.
Let's take a break for a second.
The exact details of what happened between Maila and KABC are sketchy, but what is clear is that there were issues over ownership of the Vampira character. By some accounts, there was a plan to syndicate Vampira nationally by casting other actresses as regional versions, an idea Maila balked at. Because the prototype of the character was designed by Maila for her appearance at the Bal Karib, there was little anyone could do to deprive her of her intellectual property. But she lost her forum, and like other Hollywood Cinderellas before her, she drifted into obscurity. There's public evidence of a breakdown. In 1956, after Vampira's brief second series ended, Maila attended a Halloween party dressed as a witch with a bandaged male friend dressed as accident victim James Dean. Whisper magazine made flesh. It was a joke black enough to encompass everything, even her grief. At Christmas, Maila barely survived an apartment fire. She was badly burned, but by now the papers were incapable of taking her seriously. Vampira's funeral pyre, said the lead. In the news photo, she cradles the cat she rescued in bandaged arms, unable to meet the camera's lens with her eyes. Despite a forced smile, she looks manic, humiliated, aggrieved. Just 3 weeks earlier, Maila had given her final acting performance in the costume she never quite took off again, when Ed Wood paid her $200 for her brief Plan 9 scenes. It was Vampira's wardrobe and makeup, but it wasn't Vampira. She called the character Maila in an alpha state, at least when she referred to it in front of me. The So Bad It's Good cult discovered Maila in Plan 9, though she never seemed to quite fit with the other misfits and has-beens Wood gravitated toward. Because unlike Tor Johnson and Bela Lugosi, Maila was a pioneer of postmodern irony. She wasn't just in on the joke, she invented it, or so it's always seemed to me. And then the adventure was over. Its aftermath was the rest of her life.
The carousel I was riding made the world outside the rim of it a blur to me. The TV set is the most singularly distressing to me of the aforementioned commodities. The phone running a close second. And 75% of my own former league of Hollywood sycophants, who abandoned me when my star faded and affixed themselves to her as she was vulnerable. Yes, Brad, this is an answer to your question. Do you have any opinions on Hollywood's fringe society? Any opinions, said I. That question and my answer to it. I see a fuming, bubbling mass of matter, rotating as it ferments. A myriad maggots burrow, slither, and writhe on its outer surfaces and in and about its subterranean passages. Slime-covered though we are, we cling still tenaciously to the undulating, sordid mass. For it is our world, the only world we neurotics know. Sometimes we find ourselves on its outer surfaces, where, if we pick the film of slime from our eyeballs, we can see the sun. Not feel it, of course, just see it. For we are unable to feel anything but the constant anxiety we know, which consumes us and never leaves us, save rarely to make way for a frenzied, manic sort of hysteria. Sometimes we rationalize ourselves into thinking we have renewed our strength, having burrowed deep into... Okay? You don't want to know my opinions on that subject. All right. I played some of this tape back, and it does seem to me it reads rather like reciting the dictionary and the telephone book at one and the same time. Although actually, the way that I lived it, as I lived them, they felt more rather like playing Norma Desmond in a Jean Cocteau dream sequence.
She didn't really have a lot of people in her life. She divorced in the mid-50s, never had kids, had bad experiences with people that were fans or crazy James Dean fans that thought she had cursed him, and, just all sorts of nightmare garbage.
Comedian Dana Gould befriended Maila in the mid-1990s. Like others who came into her orbit, he loved her wit and energy. He stayed around long enough to also sense a certain tragedy.
We just became friends, and I just really came to love her. She shouldn't have been available to me. She should have had 10 grandkids and be living in Glendale, and not have time for 32-year-old Plan 9 freaks.
I did a long interview with Maila about her lost years, and the details are both heartbreaking and scary. The one that stays with me, though, isn't about hard times, bad breaks, or crazed fans. It's about constancy. Here's a reading by my friend Jennifer Van Gotham of what Maila said.
Well, I stayed camera ready for 20 years, literally. Talk about naivete. I was an incurable romantic. I may still be. I kept my figure within 3 days ready to get back into Vampira, and then I thought, well, even if they offered me something new, it would be pathetic. A woman my age maintaining a figure like that. How sad. So I decided to stop staying camera ready, and I sort of got the idea they weren't going to call.
I think in a lot of ways it just ruined her life. That constant struggle to control this thing, at the end of the day, didn't get her anything. Sometimes the harder you squeeze something, the more you lose it.
As the years flew by, reclusion became a way of life. But if Vampira sometimes felt like a curse, she was also an annuity. The punks found her, then the goths, and the cult movie geeks. They were outsiders too, and they already believed that the good stuff lives in the margins.
There was a big sort of horror punk genre at the time with the Misfits and to a lesser extent, the Damned. And of course the low budgetness of Ed Wood's films in general, I think that's something, that plays into the do-it-yourself ethic that's always been sort of a part of punk from the beginning. And I think a lot of the boys find her very erotic. A lot of the girls, they dress up like Vampira.
So you just want a lockdown that's from top? Oh, so these can. Okay. I'll zoom. Ready? Great.
Genocide is the utopia for the Vatican Antichrist and all of his helpers, wicked men in high places. Where in the Bible does it tell me not to speak out against the Antichrist, against wicked presidents, kings, nations, and false religious leaders, false prophets?
She just came in cold, and we handed her this thing that we found off the street in Hollywood, this little pamphlet, and said, okay, read this. But having never seen us, having never heard us, she created this thing that to this day, it's like I still listen to it, and it's amazing. I will never do anything else that's going to even come close to that. It was our Louie, and it's there forever.
Maila could be erratic, and she burned through friendships at times. But Vampira belonged to the world now, undead and ageless, always ready to lure a new face to Maila's door. Which is how I come in. In 1994, I used the excuse of a movie magazine I was working for to seek Maila out. My timing was fortuitous because her story wasn't over, and it was headed toward an ending that was relatively happy. By then, her last hope of financial security had ended in disaster when she lost a lawsuit against the star of Elvira's movie Macabre, a show Maila did more than inspire. The original idea had been to revive the Vampira character, and Maila had been working on it with Elvira's producers. But when Maila left the project over creative differences, a syllable got altered, an earthier ghoul girl took to the airwaves, and Cassandra Peterson became the most successful horror hostess ever to appear on TV.
Who's there? Is that you? Come in, darling. I've been expecting you. Oh, come in. Don't be afraid. I won't bite, and you're bound to have a good time. Or my name isn't Elvira.
Once I was Groucho Marx. She wore the eyebrows, you know.
Greater legal minds than mine can interpret what was or wasn't decided by Nurmi versus Peterson, which had one claim dropped on jurisdictional grounds and 3 more dismissed by the court. By the time Maila and I met, she'd taken to speaking in more general terms on such subjects. She'd want you to hear her thoughts.
This, for one thing, this is a society I have noticed, this very one in America or in Hollywood, probably America, where the inventor is rarely honored of anything. It's usually the first person with plenty of money who comes along and grabs it, who goes to the bank. And I'm one of those people, too. I don't go to the bank, I'm the inventor, and I watch the other people go to the bank with my money. I don't know, it's the way of life. I don't know what to think. I pity those people. I think they're so little and so ugly. I don't pray for them. I'm not a saint, but I do pity them. And boy, they are legion.
Maila waived an appeal in her court case, with a document written by hand. In view of lack of counsel, and further, in lack of funds, I have no alternative but to discontinue this action. She signed it twice, as Maila and Vampira. Maila and I bonded instantly. She said I looked like Brando, an alleged lover, as was Orson Welles, by the way, but not, it should be said, her pal Jimmy Dean.
Ooh, those eyes. He gives me the willies.
The release of Tim Burton's Ed Wood biopic brought Maila renewed attention, and she even made selective appearances at fan conventions, an activity she was always skeptical about in my presence. But it was money, and she was in need. She had trouble walking, and her eyesight was very bad. I once saw her talk to a fan in the auditorium of the Beverly Garland Hotel, without even noticing the girl had given herself fangs by hiring an orthodontist to file her teeth.
Pardon me, Miss Vampira?
Yes.
I'm Ed Wood. I'm a film producer, and I'm currently in production on a science fiction piece with Bela Lugosi and Swedish wrestler Tor Johnson.
We had one unpleasant encounter. Knowing how nervous Maila was about the Ed Wood biopic, I arranged a private pre-release screening for her through contacts at Disney.
God, this show needs better jokes.
But Maila was deeply scarred by her past. She had convinced herself Disney was scheming to steal Vampira from her, so they could put her on lunch pails and inside Happy Meals. When I presented the screening idea to her, she accused me of being part of a broad conspiracy. I calmed her by letting her gossip about her time schooling the actress who played her, director Tim Burton's girlfriend, Lisa Marie.
Yeah, how about this? What if I don't have any lines? I'll play the part mute.
We lunched regularly at an Italian restaurant she liked, and once, for a special treat, I took her out to dinner at what remained of the Los Feliz Brown Derby. She wrote me a moving letter about our relationship, one I'll always keep.
In the mid-1950s, Vampira rose weekly from her crypt to host a late-night scary movie right here on Channel 7. Today, the woman who played Vampira is 78 years old.
I think what sustained her in her later years wasn't the growth of the Vampira cult, though that was exponential after a while. It was a relatively small group of admirers who started out as fans of the icon, but came to love the person instead.
Has it been tough?
Yeah. Not lately, but it's been tough.
Because Maila, had just such a difficult time with the business, that also made her pull back into herself.
Maila's friend Gabrielle Geiselman.
If you made it past, the moat of that, then she would sort of allow you into the part of her where she felt comfortable telling you stories about things, and she felt comfortable telling you about her experiences. But that was a very small group of people.
Maila was complicated and surely ambitious once upon a time. I think she found in the end she had simpler needs. I attended Maila's funeral in 2008. It was a smaller affair than it might have been, perhaps 60 people or so, because it was closed to fans of Vampira, but open to the friends of Maila Nurmi. Still, it felt good to see that before she returned to whatever unique planet she came from, Maila had found so many companionable aliens to keep her company.
When it comes to the Vampira character, are you proud of the fact that the image you created has endured for so long?
Oh, yes, I am. It's my child, you know, and you like to feel that your child has succeeded. I birthed her and nourished her and groomed her and sent her out into the world, sent her to college. I'm glad she succeeded in business.
In my experience, when someone dies, you think about things left undone. This has been one of them.
I dream.
Good evening. I am Vampira. I trust you have had the good fortune to have had a perfectly terrible week, darling. I can't do it.
You look pretty good.
I can't do
Great.
it.
Thank you, darling. You were wonderful.